Okay. God, that's such an incredible, insightful, and heavy film, Anthony. I get so teary-eyed when he says that line about putting on the suit and wanting to be Mr. Somebody. Can you tell us why you decided to do this project?
The title is in some ways, comes from that line of Mr. Somebody. I want to know what it feels like to be Mr. Somebody. And a large part of why I got involved is because we live in a culture, we live in a society where every day we're told that we're nobody. And that extends to someone like Bam. And I was blessed and privileged to live in a community where I didn't have to join a gang. I didn't feel like that was a pressure on me necessarily. It was there, but I never entered. Some people don't have that same choice, that same opportunity to avoid that life. And so I thought it was important to enter into the story in a way where we weren't doing a disservice to what we saw and we heard. And really, we didn't go in to make a film necessarily. We went in to just talk to the community, and it ended up becoming more than that because, like I said, this was something that we were like, more than just us need to hear this, because Bam was so profound with how he explained his community and explained his environment.
Awesome. And when you and I chatted a couple of weeks ago, I told you that I found this film so especially important for the CSU community to see this, because while this may not be everyone's background or experience, we have students that come from backgrounds like this that are just trying to be somebody, that are trying to break that generational curse. And when they land on CSU campus, we need to do everything we can as faculty, staff, alumni to help these students feel included and supported. So that they can succeed in life. And so when we think about Bam's story, what can you tell us a little bit more about why you decided to pick Bam specifically? Because he has no connection to you, correct?
He has no connection. So actually, we ended up going to Watts, and I was invited into the project originally by my friend Brian, who directed the film, and was asked to come in and help and support and produce alongside. And so it's a community that he had some touch points in, and one that I actually was connected to through an old mentor of mine who talked about the Watts LA riots back in the 60s that King visited. So it's always been a community that I wanted to learn more about. So came and went there, and we were looking for a main subject for a potential film. And the second or third day we met Bam. And right away, when we heard him speak, when we heard the way that he could describe things in a way only he can, as you saw throughout the movie, we're like, this is our person. This is it right here. And then the question was, well, would we get the access that we needed to tell the story properly? And after the second or third day, they trusted us enough to really open up a lot more. And essentially they were like, training day came to the same neighborhood to film. We gave you more access to our lives than we did training day. And they took us on some things that we couldn't even show. But at the end of the day, it just came down to a gut feeling that Bam had been the person that we were looking for to really be the narrator for his particular community. And I think it ended up being a good choice.
And you talk about building trust and going into the community. How do you think the film team went about building that trust with Bam and with the neighborhood?
Well, that was one of my primary roles, was to facilitate that. And so, like I said, I didn't grow up in an environment where I joined a gang, but I definitely grew up in an environment where my family, friends, everyone I know, there's 1 out of every 10 people I know somehow ended up in a gang. And so it wasn't a foreign territory. So some of it was relying on my experience in different neighborhoods. And then some of it was just like, how he said, when you come to Watts, if you're welcome, if you're not welcomed. And so there's a whole way of moving there where it was like, in some ways, we're just at the mercy of the neighborhood. Like, if they had said straight up, get out of here, we don't trust you, then this film would have never come to be. So I think it was just them trusting what our intent was behind the film. We weren't there to get rich. We weren't there to make a lot of money off of it. We straight up told them at the beginning that anything we do make off the profit of the film is going to go back in the community. And that was something that really earned their respect there. And to this day, even after the film, we've tried to maintain relationships and community there by going back and visiting. I still reach out to Bam every once in a while. We still get the chance to talk. And so this wasn't just a one-time fly-by deal. This was something where there were a lot of inroads before the actual film, and there's been work after to maintain the respect in the community.
And so the film shows a significant number of shots with children with voiceovers. Why was that artistic decision made?
These came from I think I have two kids. So I have a son and a daughter, 9 and 7, and kids have the ability to tell the truth in a way that no one else can. They're not at the point where, the show that used to be on Kids Say the Darndest Thing, they're not at the point where they know how to lie. And so I think just the naivety of a child was a big artistic direction for the film. We wanted to be able to just have kids speak about their own environment. And so we did cut some of that because Bam was the main narrator. But at the same time, even having kids speak to their environment gave us a window that no one else could. And it's just because they're just so honest and very aware. I think we sometimes think that we have this mistaken view that kids are less intelligent because they're younger, but I don't think intelligence or wisdom comes with age necessarily. Some of those kids there have grown up fast and grown up quickly. So, it's just one of those things where we wanted to, in this whole film, we wanted an authentic voice more than anything else. And so Bam's authenticity fed into the kids, and that just kind of snowballed from there.
So did you actually interview any of the kids featured? I know you said that you spoke with them. Did you, that you cut a lot of things out. Did you actually interview some of the kids?
Yeah, we had hundreds of hours of footage, and we're able to interview a few kids. I think it was with kids, you just want to make sure that you're working with their parents. It was a little bit more complicated. And then, like I said, we just wanted to have one main voice in the film. And Bam ended up being the voice that we went with. But we were able to talk to some of the kids. And to this day, when we go to the neighborhood, they welcome us, they hug us. It's a place where there might be a future project here with some of the kids that we saw.
What was the perspective of the kids?
They reminded me, and I've gone to freedom rides around the country, and Watts is one neighborhood that will always have a place in my heart. Baltimore was another neighborhood where there's a unique character in these kind of places where kids aren't allowed to be kids. They have to grow up quickly because they see things they're not supposed to see. And so you get stories about kids who have to go to their teacher's funeral or who didn't eat that day. And it's 5 p.m. and they haven't eaten that day yet. And so there's a toughness and a character that it becomes harder for them to cry, harder for them to be kids. You have to toughen up at an early age. And I think throughout the film, you see this loss of innocence over time, where now Bam has lost a piece of himself. He's looking back at his life and his community as something that he can't access anymore. And so a huge burden of this film was be able to somehow contribute to this idea that kids can be kids in these environments. And of course, the juxtaposition, the contradiction is that the more they are kids, the more vulnerable they are to different forms of violence. Like, you have to have this tough exterior or you can't survive in some of these neighborhoods. And so there was this this weird moment that I've seen in these kinds of neighborhoods where 12 years old, 13 years old, someone has to make this quick transition from being a kid full of innocence and wonder and discovery to becoming more hardened. And so we met a lot of kids right on the edge of that precipice. And it was tragic and also beautiful at the same time to kind of see the resiliency in the community, all they had been through. And you didn't see a lot of quit in Watts, LA. You don't see a lot of quit in Baltimore, in Park Hill, where I'm from.
Now, why did the film team decide to shoot in black and white with varying cameras? Was this a stylistic approach, or was this done to obtain a bigger meaning?
So originally we didn't know if it was all going to be in black and white. We used a Super 8 film, which is the retro look that you see throughout. It's kind of grainy. And we knew we were going to include that for flashbacks, but we did a first cut. It had a lot more color. It had more booming music. And we were like, man, this feels a little bit like a rap video. And that's not what we're going for because we've seen that before. So we didn't want it to look like some rap video because we thought people would become deadened to the actual message. And it's not what we're trying to say. So the black and white feel was to really strip everything down. Like it's the equivalent of like what I would think it would be like for maybe a woman to walk around with no makeup on. Like we wanted to see the rawest form of Watts possible, a stripped down version. We cut some of the music and used a lot more sound from the community, from the little bells and whistles that you hear, the voices and the chatter, and a lot less of the hip hop soundtrack that we had originally. And that was a tough choice. Like I remember that was a moment where we had some back and forth in the editing cycle. It's like, which way are we going to go with this? And we were afraid that if we stripped it down too much, would it be too boring? And did it have enough to carry on its own? And looking back, I think it was totally the right choice because you get to see Watts for itself. You get to hear Bam for himself. You don't see like he's not rapping to a soundtrack. He's just telling a story, and I think it draws you in a little bit more because it's more stripped down.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. When I saw it the first time, I was like, it's gritty. Like I like that, and I love that you pointed out like you hear like the sounds of Watts, you hear the sirens, and you know the whistles. I think from maybe like bicycles. I think I heard. So that's really dope. And speaking of the rap scene that you left in the film, how did you choose when to include that specific segment in the film?
It was kind of a gut feeling. I think it's like at the time when he starts to rap, it's still very much an introduction to Watts. And so I think the idea of that particular segment was like, it was on the heels of me asking them, what does Watts sound like? And they're like, do you want to hear the gunshots and stuff like that? I was like, whatever you want to describe it as, what does it sound like? And so the rap kind of introduction was someone just taking you on a tour through the neighborhood. Is kind of like the theme song that we chose in lieu of like an actual soundtrack that would be the introduction of the film in some ways and what it felt like to be in Watts. And so we were just blessed by that gem of like, had no idea it was coming. And that's another thing you see throughout Watts is like, there's talent all over the place that you would never expect to see. The issue is that a lot of it can't be monetized. They're very much locked out of the economic structure of their neighborhood in a way that it can provide. And so what do? Do you go off and work at a fast food joint? Do you go off and try to be an athlete? Or do you join a gang and make some money on the side? And so he was one of the most talented people I saw in the neighborhood. And I just saw it all over. Like people could rap, they could sing, they could do math, there was all kinds of hidden talent. And that was one way we wanted to introduce the community. And also say like, we wanted to tell this story, not just from a lens of deficit and trauma and tragedy. We wanted to show a little bit of the beauty. It's a tough story, but we wanted to show some of the gems that we saw that were beyond, that weren't just rooted in pain and suffering. And that's always been a big part of like my value as a filmmaker and a storyteller is where's the hope? Where's the little lights of inspiration, even in a dark place? And he was one of those moments for us.
What was the hardest or the most challenging part about making this film?
It's tough. You go into these communities and they're riddled with problems, and it's like there's no easy solution. And there's no Band-Aid that's going to fix this tomorrow for the people that are there. And so as much as we were welcomed into this neighborhood, we go out and I'm in relative safety. I'm in a relatively nice neighborhood or house or whatever. And for a while, I could not pull myself from the images and the thoughts of what I saw and just wanted to be able to help, wanted to be able to change it. And I think that was a big thing for me, was like, could we be doing more? Could this film go some places and maybe raise money for BAM or the community? And as an artist, I had to really settle on, sometimes you have the opportunity to do some of that, and we will try to do more. But there's also a power in just telling the story for itself. And maybe some 8-year-old kid's going to see that one day and be inspired to do some kind of like crazy idea that's going to flip everything upside down. But we sometimes we're just a spark to larger change. But I think the idea that we weren't doing enough was something that hit me hard. It's like, what's going to happen to Ben? What's going to happen to his kids? And you fall in love with people that you don't feel like you can help as adequately as you could.
Yeah, I imagine that's difficult. And speaking kind of along those lines, Ben mentioned his outlook on death and how he knows it's coming at any moment, but he wants to leave something for his children. Aside from selling drugs, what do you think someone should do in his position to make it out of the poverty that he's known his whole life?
I don't know. I think that's for everyone to answer for themselves. I think that my whole thing is, I definitely understand the choices that someone would make in that environment. Bam got arrested for possession of a firearm at one point in time, and technically it was against the law for him to have a firearm as a felon. But I totally understand why he would have a firearm in the neighborhood that he lives in. To not have a gun in some of those situations is a death sentence. And so it's almost like you're playing a game that's rigged once you're in a community like that. You don't have access to education. You don't have a lot of economic inroads into the middle class, home ownership or inheritance of any kind of sort. And so, again, you have to deal with scraps. And when you're dealing with scraps, there's creative ways that you put things together. It's not always going to be legal. It's not always going to be something that people who aren't from that context will understand. But when it comes between, like, well, I go home and kiss my little girl or be a completely law-abiding citizen, I can see how someone would choose to be over following the law that's been handed down to them. And so I think when you have issues like mass incarceration and the mass imprisonment of Black men in those kind of communities, that's a rigged game that they are up against so much that I think it's more criminal to design communities like that than it is to move in those communities for your own survival. The criminality of it all is like that this exists in the first place. And so I have a lot of compassion and grace for people that do what they have to do to come up out of these environments.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a theme that stuck out to me when I first watched the film, was the idea of prison reform. It's like, what do you do when you're stuck in that system? Like, how do you get out? Because you're stuck in the system, and it's just a cycle that repeats itself. What do you hope people get from this film? And is that hope the same for people of color as it is for non-people of color?
Yeah. I hope that people will stop and just see, right? So we walk by people like Bam every day. And there's, like you just said before, we talked about on our call that those people are at CSU. Like, I have friends at CSU when I was on campus who are very much in the same kind of neighborhoods and environments, including myself in some ways. And so I would just hope that this film engenders more compassion in an area where we might have been more prone to just look over, that we would stop and see and wrestle with the hard things. It's so easy to put a label on somebody: oh, they're a gang member, oh, they're Black, they're poor, oh, she's a woman, he's gay. Like, we deal in labels without actually seeing beyond the label. And so a huge part of this film was about getting into the intricacies of another person in a way that might just be a fresh angle to seeing something and seeing someone. And I just hope that that inspires more of that in our community, the way that we walk and talk. And then I hope also that this film, there is a side of it that's really practical and real. You said prison reform and the ending of mass incarceration. I really hope that this can inspire more movements towards that, because it's not just about loving people who are different. It's also about loving in a form that creates justice. And so I want to see justice in Watts, LA, just like I want to see it in every hood in America. We need that.
Absolutely. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit to talk about your experience at CSU, since you are a CSU alum. Can you tell us a little bit about your time at CSU? When we spoke, you told us about some people and kind of communities that influenced and encouraged you. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I went to CSU and I was a whole knucklehead, and I almost got kicked out of school. And first of all, I didn't want to be in college. I didn't know, like my mom did my college application for me. And I'm just thankful she did, because if she didn't, I don't even know where I would end up at. Like I had some JUCO offers for basketball, but nothing too serious. There's something, I'm dealing with some kind of allergy issue. I don't know what this is, but so bear with me. I got some water here. But at the end of the day, my life turned around at CSU. I went from being a knucklehead, almost getting kicked out of college, to actually graduating with honors. And the difference between the beginning and the end were the people that were surrounding me. I had the key academic community with Ty Nasaka, Barb Musselwhite, Paul Thayer, like still the village that surrounded me. And then like I started out with organic chemistry as my major. Thought I was gonna be a doctor one day. And not because I liked medicine, but just because I thought it'd be cool to be called Dr. Grimes and do all that. So I thought I was gonna be a doctor, took organic chemistry, was like, nah, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. Just really lost on campus, and switched my major to speech communication, and it ended up being like the best thing I ever did in my life. I met Professor Greg Dickinson, who's a huge reason why I'm on here today. And his lectures, the way that he would speak about life and wrestle with the big questions of what it meant to be human, what it meant to be a more compassionate human, how speech is what separated us from animals and from the rest of the creation. Like his way of teaching grabbed me and changed my life. And from there, public speaking has remained a huge facet of my life and my career. So I owe CSU a lot, actually, with my development. And yeah, I think I went from being a knucklehead to being a semi-educated, compassionate person. And that's what education is supposed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And how did you get started in your career? Like, it seems like that's like everyone's dream. Like, I want to be in film, or I want to be an actor. I want to be in front of the camera or behind the camera. How did you actually get started in your career?
So I kind of graduated from college and never really planted in a traditional job. I did some nonprofit initiatives. I worked in some really cool gigs, and they gave me the flexibility to like jump at a dime or stop at a dime and go do something. And one of those things was Ferguson. So 2014, Mike Brown died, was murdered by a white police officer. I jumped on a plane and went to Ferguson and started protesting and joining that movement. It changed me so much. I came back to Denver and a movement began. So we started doing freedom rides to Ferguson and back, to the point that it kind of blew up in our city in a good way. Like we went back after the second trip, wrote a handwritten letter to Mayor Hancock, and at the time just said, if we don't get justice in our city, we're going to shut this city down, just like they're doing in Ferguson. Didn't know what we were saying. We're like a really bold statement for a bunch of like young kids to make. And he listened. And so we started feeling empowered and moving towards different things in the city. And in that time, I was on the front of the camera, like ended up making the front page of the paper one day, and was featured on the news and all this stuff. And I would have enough moments where I was interviewed by somebody and they misquoted something, or moments where like I saw how much power the media had in telling the story.
Mhm.
And from way back, I always wanted to be in film, but that really inspired me like to really get in it more, because it was like, I think there's more power behind the camera and telling the story than being a subject of the story. And so I kind of pivoted at that time to say, okay, I want to actually tell some of these stories. So I did a little documentary about my time in Ferguson, and then kind of grew from there to different projects. But that's where it comes from. Is for me, like I've had enough of like the in front of the camera stuff. Like if it comes, it's cool. But I really want to be a storyteller at heart and tell inspiring stories that let you see people you would ordinarily see.
And so, with that being said, in your opinion, aside from the storytelling aspect, what skills and roles do you think are most important and necessary to be a successful film producer?
Um, yeah, every role is different. So there's producer, there's director, there's editor, and I've kind of like been in all of those genres. I think relationships are important, because especially in a place like Denver, everything's relationship driven, and so you have to have the network to pull together projects. Like nobody goes out with a camera by themselves and makes a whole film. It takes a team. This film took an incredible team. So I think that's the first thing, is be able to like leverage good relationships in your life. And then there's just knowing some of the basic elements of story. Like some of the stories you see on movies are recycled over time. There's elements of a good story. So like with Bam, Mr. Somebody, our first cut was kind of it was off, because it was too dialogical. It was like it wasn't a story. Like it wasn't somebody struggling to get something and get past an obstacle and didn't have a resolution to it. And so we had to go back and really edit it and make the story better. But just knowing those elements of a good story, knowing how to, when you watch a good movie on Netflix or like a TV show on Netflix, there's tension at every point. There's tension in every scene, and knowing how to build tension through the forms of story. And then I would say like having some technical skills important. So for me, I came into filmmaking through photography and learned about light composition, stuff like that. That stuff is really important with film, after you have the other fundamentals in place. So building some kind of technical skill, whether it's lighting, camera work, or sound editing or something like that, like going deep on your particular skill, and then knowing what you don't know to be like, oh, there's a sound person over here that could help with this.
And what was the process like of going through all of those hours of footage? Like, was there a general plan going into the editing? Because for someone like me who is completely unfamiliar with it, I would just be like, what are we doing with all of this? So was there a plan, or did you go based on what Bam said in interviews, or how did you all kind of tackle it?
Man, I think the biggest thing, oh God, like that's a really hard question. I don't really know how to answer that, except for to say like it just took a lot of time in the editing room to just re-listen to everything that was said. I didn't do all that myself. Like Brian was a great person in that process. I think at times we would listen to different segments of interviews. I think knowing before you go in, being able to mark different parts in the tape where it's like, oh, that we need to come back to that. That's going to be good. That's going to be good stuff. I think the hardest thing to do, I'll just say this generally, like cutting and editing down is tough, because like you think everything's good, and I think we get into trouble sometimes of trying to say too much. And so for us to cut back to like a 14, 15-minute film after hours of footage, it took a lot of discipline, because in this case, like less is more. And so you want to give the audience room for their own imagination. You want to have enough white space in there so it's not just word after word after word. And so that was tough. And I think there's some archival footage and archival stuff that maybe we'll be able to use in long form at some point in time, and we might resurrect it. But for now, like, it's been a lot of work. We probably just want to put the project down for a little while.
Yeah, that was actually a question that came in through the comments. Would you ever consider adapting it into a feature-length documentary?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Like, I think my next project is going to be more fiction. I think to go back and like make this into a full-length thing, probably not. But what does sometimes happen is with short films, some studio will see it and like, oh, I want to make this into more. Ironically, though, Bam's story, one of the first things he told us is like there is a Netflix movie about Bam called Imperial Courts or Imperial Dreams, one of the two. And it's actually currently on. It's a fiction story. So it's kind of already been done. And it's based on his life.
Has COVID affected your career in the past year at all?
Yeah, it's weird because like I love speaking and was traveling quite a bit doing that. And even like now, it's just weird not to see the crowd, not to see who we're speaking to. It's kind of a weird feeling. So like there's less opportunity. And then when you have it, being behind a camera, it's just a lot less intimate. And so we're all trying to figure out from a filmmaking standpoint of how does this process look of making a film in a COVID environment where you're less intimate. There's travel restrictions in certain places still. And then when it comes like promoting the film and watching it, what's going to happen to film when like you can't go to a theater and watch it? And that's like making an album and not being able to have a concert around an album. Like that's the part that I look forward to the most, is like speaking and talking about it and watching it in front of a group of people. So that was weird. And COVID kind of struck right when we started making this project, right when we started to promote this project. We were going to screen it across the country. And because of COVID, we kind of had to scale down, and definitely took a hit because of that.
So what are you working on now, or what's your next project? What's in the works for you?
So I'm working on a documentary called Stretch, and actually I'm going to be featured in parts of it, but it's a documentary on should I stay in America or leave the country based on the political environment here. So at the end of it, I may actually be like packing up and moving to South America or something like that. So that's in the works right now. We're currently doing a sizzle. That should be out in like 30 days or so.
Nice.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. Okay, so we've got last question to wrap things up here. Where can people see more of your work? You say you should have something out in about 30 days. Like, how can they keep up with you? Where can they see what you're doing and what you're working on?
So I have a website called anthonygrimes.com, and you can always go there. I'm currently redesigning some things, but it's up there now, and that's always a good place to check. And then hopefully, now that I know you and the whole CSU Alumni Association, I'll be sure to like spread some things through you as well.
Love it. Thank you so much, Anthony. I so appreciated you joining us and chatting with us and sharing this beautiful film with us. We really appreciate having you here.
Thanks for having me. You have a good night.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. If you have a moment to fill out the post-event survey, your feedback will be greatly appreciated. It's linked in the comments. Have a great evening, everyone. Stay safe, stay stalwart, and go Rams.